How you doing, guys? This is Brent Mimo from Public House Restaurant in Brookline for How To Heroes. Today we're going to do some beef stew. Now, as you know, I like cooking with beer. Why? Because beer's awesome. And say you got a leftover beer, day-old beer, or just beer that you don't know what to do with or anything, you can cook with it. Now, for beef stew, I'll use a big pot. The beauty of beef stew is a one-pot meal. You know, my mother used to always make beef stew or chicken cacciatore or sometimes chicken soup. It would all go in one pot. You'd serve it with bread, and it would be just, you know, no hassle. Now, for today, we're going to do beef stew with some vegetables, some root vegetables, just some simple beef stock, and we're going to pick one of these beers later, depending on my mood. We'll see what happens. Simple herbs. Again, couldn't be easier. Anyone can do it. So first things first, I got my pan on the heat. Should be pretty hot because we're going to sear this beef. Now you can go to your butcher shop, you can go to a supermarket and you ask for beef for stew, chuck meat. In this case I'm using sirloin vein end, which is a little tougher but has really good flavor. What I'm going to do is I'm going to season it. As with everything, you season everything. Salt, fresh pepper. This thing sounds pretty good, huh? So I'm going to mix that up. Now you want your pan to be nice and hot so you can start to get some color on this meat. You add your oil, you can always see it starts to shimmer. Even a little bit of smoke is all right. And of course, what would cooking be without butter? So I have some rutabaga, some turnip, carrot, celery, onion, some shallots, garlic, of course potatoes. Wouldn't be a beef stew without potatoes. A little bit of flour for thickening. Any AP flour will work or anything like that. Some parsley from my garden and some sage and thyme and rosemary also from my garden. You can see that this recipe really doesn't take a lot. It's all about nice flavors and simple process. So my butter's melted. You can see a little bit of smoke rising from the pan. Always be careful. You want to add in a single layer. Of course, you can use tongs or something like that. Unfortunately, I have no feeling in my hands from cooking for so long. You can see that. It's already starting to smell nice. The fat's bubbling. Sounds good, too. Just inviting. You want to be careful not to burn your meat. So you want to keep a close eye on it. You don't want to go run out, talk on the phone. Don't do that. Don't leave your food. So what you're doing here is, as you're browning the meat, you're going to get some color on the bottom of the pan. That's perfectly fine. You want to keep that. That's called fond. That's going to create a lot of the flavor for the end product stew. Yeah, see? Keep your heat on high. Now would be a good time if you hadn't cut your vegetables, get your vegetables chopping. Of course, I always like to do things ahead of time, so I've done this. Beef stock. We make it here at the restaurant. You may not have a restaurant, you know, in your kitchen. I do. But what you can do is you can go to any store. You can buy beef bouillon. You can buy beef stock. Even some specialty butchers carry little packages of beef base. That's all well and good. Just be careful with your sodium intake. A lot of bases and bouillons can be high in sodium and even MSG. So you might want to, you know, best is always to make your own. Simple beef bones from your butcher, little vegetables, water. It's not rocket science. As you can see, the meat's starting to get nice and brown. And down here you can see all that nice fond that I called. We already have some fat in the pan. I'm going to add a little bit more butter. This is unsalted butter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add flour to the beef. It's integral for the stewing process. It's going to cause the meat to coat and get a little more color, and what's going to happen is when I start adding the vegetables and the liquids, it's going to thicken up kind of like a roux. But in this case, I'm just going to use a little bit of flour, because after a while, when you're stewing, obviously it's going to take about an hour. And it's going to reduce, and you're going to get thickened naturally. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little flour right now. In French, they call this sanger, to coat with flour. Now, one important thing, when you add flour to a pan, take it off. Flour burns, you ruin the dish. And even a great chef can't fix that. So once I have about 3 tablespoons of flour in there, put the pot back on the heat. You can see the flour is absorbing into the fat. Start adding some vegetables. Of course, my favorites, shallots. Garlic, that's a lot of garlic, so I'm not going to add all that. You got to look at that. Oh, it starts to smell nice. So here I'm going to add a little more fat. In this case, canola oil. Any vegetable oil is all right. Even olive oil. So what you want to do is you want to scrape the bottom a little bit to get some of that fond released. Oh, you can smell the garlic and the shallots smell really good. You can start adding your vegetables now. Now, onions. You can use pearl onions. You can use sweet onions, red onions. You know, in this case, I've just used simple yellow Bermuda onions. Add those. Add your carrots. See, this is the thing with beef stew. Your turnips and your celery. The beauty about beef stew, if you have anything in your house, I have a winter squash, I have an acorn squash, I have peas, parsnips, fennel, anything can all go into beef stew. This is all going to get coated with a little bit of the flour. Yes. We'll let that cook for about a minute and a half. Like I said, you don't want to burn the flour. When you burn the flour, very off taste. Tastes like burnt toast. You just don't want that. Not to mention, has no nutritional value. There we go. All right, guys. So you can see at the bottom, we have what I call the fond there. That's going to be the deliciousness, the foundation of this stew. Excuse me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with my beef stock. Again, you can use chicken stock, veal stock, beef stock. In this case, I'm adding about 1.33 liters. Now, this is important. Once you get your liquid in there, you want to scrape that fond as best you can. Right off the bottom. Oh, you can smell it. Oh, it smells good. It smells good. You can see the fond's starting to come off. That's flavor. That's flavor, and that's going to thicken up our stew here. Getting back to thickeners, like I said, you can use so many things. You can use any sort of flour, rice flour, potato flour, cornstarch, kudzu starch, tapioca starch. I've even thickened soups with potatoes. I've even thickened soups with those instant mashed potatoes you buy in a box. It works. Okay. Now I'm going to let that start to get hot and simmer. Add a little salt. Okay, so beef stew, it's got to have potatoes, In Ireland, Scotland, in America, you can't have a beef stew without potatoes. These are just some simple russet potatoes. I buy them by the case. We use them for French fries, home fries, mashed potatoes, all that kind of stuff. In this case, I've just cut about 1.5 potatoes total. This should be good for this recipe, which serves 4 people. And they're in water, so they don't oxidize. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take those out of the water, throw them right in. Your potatoes and your carrots are pretty much what's going to take the longest to cook, so you got to factor that into your timing here. There we go. You can add a little bit of the water if you need. So while those are cooking and we're forming our base, I'm going to go into the beers. Okay, beef stew with beers. Now, of course, there's millions of beers you could use. I work at a Belgian ale house, so I have millions of beers that I can choose from. Now, to stand up to something like beef stew, it's hearty. It's going to be nicely seasoned. It's got a lot of herbs in it and different flavored sweet vegetables. I'm thinking stout. Now you can use Guinness, but everyone uses Guinness. Why don't you use something with a little more complexity to it, like something from the Young's family, an oatmeal stout, double chocolate stout. Those are going to give you like a nice malty coffee sort of flavor, and people are going to taste the stew and say, you know, wow, what is that other flavor in there? Is that beer or a lager? Or you just say, you know, it's just something I picked up at the store. But you could always use anything. I'm going to go with this one, Sammy Smith's Imperial Stout. It's big, it's heady, it's got a lot of flavor, a lot of maltiness, complexity, and it's going to go well with this beef. So I'm going to open this up. Oh yeah. So give it a taste here. Oh, it's going to be really nice. So when you're seasoning, this is going to add a slight sweetness to it, and also a little bit of bitterness. So I added some salt. To me, it's just about perfectly seasoned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my beer. Oh, I love it. I'm going to go the whole way. Just get in there. There it is. Always recycle, too. Very important. Now is the time. If you're going to go make a cell phone call, have a cigarette, watch TV, drink a beer, you can walk away from this. As always, when you're simmering, go to medium-low heat. Make sure your kitchen's nice and clean. One thing I'm going to do before I step away, like I said before, I have a garden, and it's getting cold out. A lot of these herbs are going to perish. So what I'm going to do is use these in these dishes I can. You can freeze dry them. You can keep them in jars for over the winter months. What I said here is this is rosemary, thyme, sage. It's going to be another nice addition to the flavor profile here. So when you're going to take this down for about 25-30 minutes, it's going to thicken. All the vegetables are going to get tender. The starches from the potatoes and turnips are going to start to thicken even more, and just make an overall hearty one-pot meal here. So we're going to take a break. We're going to take about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and we'll come back and check on our stew. Okay, so we've been simmering here for about 15, 17, 20 minutes. One thing you want to do is you want to come back to it, make sure it's not sticking. Again, if it sticks, it can scorch. You have to call it smoked beef stew. We don't want to do that. So our meat should be getting tender. Our potatoes and carrots should be also getting nice and al dente. Always taste your food. I always stress that. All good chefs will stress that. Taste and season. Always constantly seasoning. So to serve with this stew, I'm going to go with bread. Simple baguette. I'm lucky enough to have at this restaurant a grill. So I'm going to put a little canola oil on there. Salt and pepper. And, you know, herbs, chives, parsley. Anything that's going to brighten a dish up, I'll use it. Right on your grill, it's going to flare up. Nothing like that. Just country bread. Just country bread. Give it about a minute. It'll get nice and crusty. Now I'm going to serve this right in the bowl with the stew. So we're just about complete here. Toasted our bread up. Seasoned our stew. Worked up an appetite. Perfect. So here at the Public House, we serve a humongous portion of beef stew with a humongous portion of bread. But for this recipe, you could probably feed 4 people, your roommates, your family, you know, just you and a loved one, a couple days. The best thing about beef stew, I think, aside from being a one-pot meal, is when you look at it, it's comida paysan. It's just peasant food, simple warming, a lot of colors. I'm going to add some more fresh herbs from my garden, parsley, chives, throw the bread in. Give me a spoon. Just give me a spoon and you're ready.